Look, my nigga, this is dedication. This is anti-head.
My name is Jay Chosen One. This is not going to be on gaming. This is going to be about my hip hop career and just the impact of Nipsey Hussle. A lot of people don't know. I think a lot of people probably think all over this different places of the world that it's exaggerated how much Nipsey Hussle made a impact on the state of California. That is not a lie. He made a huge impact. I'm wearing my California shirt in my finest blue, if you know what Nipsey's about. Well, actually, let's talk about that first, actually. I think what Nipsey represents to a lot of people is honestly, in my unedited opinion, that you can strive to be something more and you can come from anything. Yeah, he started out as a gang member, but that doesn't mean you end up as a gang member. Like, you can have whatever start that you have, you know? Like, whether or not you understand this in California and just this area in general, like, gang life is a real thing, you know what I mean? And whether it's just being a part of your community or being a part of just that life, sometimes you can grow to escape it. Like, what people don't know is like what Bill Gates said: it's not your fault you're born poor, it's your fault when you die poor. Nipsey Hussle represented everything good in hip hop. He was exactly what nobody wanted to see. Someone who was like this former gang member, this guy that came from a rough neighborhood that people would point at and say, oh, this guy isn't really anything. And then at the end of the day, he was the biggest thing in the world. You know what I mean? Me growing up, I'm actually way older than Nipsey. You can't tell, but back in the days, we used to do the same thing Nipsey would do in a way different way. Like, nowadays, there's a million beat making softwares. You can go on the internet, find beats and stuff. Back in the day, when you used to make CDs, like I used to make CDs, you go to Walmart and you see kids selling CDs out the trunk. I'd always trade my CD for someone else's CD because I knew they'd be good, because you had to spend money on yourself. You had to actually go out to the studio. You actually had to do something to prove that you were good, you know? And so, like, some of the people I end up getting became big stars, actually. You know, I remember when I got, what's his name? Pastor Troy. I got a Pastor Troy CD at one point, and I was like, who the fuck is this? And it turned out to be fucking Pastor Troy. But it's funny because, you know, like, the grind is there. He was one of the few people that really embodied the grind, because technically nobody knows this. Nobody ever talks about this. There's no such thing as a new artist. Every artist has been grinding for a long time. Technically, he was up for Best New Artist against Cardi B. Everyone knew him from his mixtapes. He was a mixtape legend. Like, he made 7 mixtapes before this actual thing. And what was funny about him was the mainstream didn't want him. He represented everything that they didn't want. I remember, I'll put a picture of it, when Jay-Z bought like 100, 200 CDs from him, because what Nipsey would do was Nipsey didn't care about the mainstream. He wanted to make the music he wanted to make. So he'd set a number and amount of money he'd want to make and press that many CDs to where he'd make that much money. At one point, Jay-Z bought enough CDs so he could make, I don't know, his target was like, I don't know, $100,000, and he did it. And it was insane to me because this guy grinded. The reason he died was because he loved his community. This guy was a community activist. He was all over the city. You could run into him. And really, like, his bodyguard, J-Rock, even though J-Rock was there, you would just assume him to be just a friend of his. The reason he died was total jealousy. The guy that killed him, his nickname was Shitty Cuz. You know what I mean? In the Crips, he was not seen as a good guy. Like, Shitty Cuz means, like, nobody likes you. And it was pretty messed up at the end of the day, because the most honorable guy lost his life, because the one guy that could have saved him, I was listening to Charlamagne talk about this, the one guy that could have saved him was Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey was everything, like the exact opposite of Eric Holder. This guy was a Crip who ended up becoming a huge businessman, who became a huge success, made money off his mixtapes. What I hate about what they're reporting now is the Marathon store. Yeah, he owned that. Does anyone know that complex was about to go out of business 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks ago? And Nipsey just bought the complex. Like Nipsey was the man. Like it was really messed up because people are like thinking that like, oh no, they're overcharging this young black man. Like no, this man like meant a lot to his community. You know what I mean? Like it's sad because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you can't have Nipsey come back. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of his music, but what's sad is at this point, like, people are really getting into it. You know what I mean? I think what I didn't realize and what I didn't know at the time was I usually have this thing where I do listen to most rappers and buy their albums. I wasn't really into like going into the mixtape scene and all that, but with Nipsey, what I should have realized is the things that they were glorifying on the radio and things that they would play from him weren't always what he thought. Like listening to him now, I think he's a mix of Meek Mill because he kind of has that yelly style, and MC Ren. Randomly, I thought MC Ren was one of those guys who was like really West Coast, but could rap. You know what I mean? Like there's very few like gangster rappers that I think actually had the ability to actually rap. You know what I mean? As opposed to play a character. Nipsey was not a character. Nipsey was exactly 100% himself. But really, what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, I really respect him, and he is actually one of my heroes in the sense that he proves that there's still a grind, you know, like, and no matter what, like, you can still be a success to your community by just being someone that, like, people can turn to. People turn to him for all kinds of stuff. At the end of the day, the reason, did you hear this? The reason he was at the Marathon store, which he owned, was his friend just got out of prison after 20 years, and he was going to give him free clothes so he could meet up with his family. That dude ended up shot, and Nipsey ended up dead. Just because you were jealous about what this guy became on his own merit. Like we gotta stop the violence, though, man. Like I get it. Like I get it. We're in this California gang life, but it's sad because what people don't talk about, they're from the same gang. It wasn't like a blood killing a Crip. It was a Crip killing a Crip, and they knew each other. And I think there was beef before. If you check, Nipsey's Twitter feed before the accident happened, he said something like, "Enemies, it's good to have enemies" or something. And there's some confrontation right now about like what happened there. But in general, Nipsey was a huge part of this community. And yes, his death is a huge part of this city, of this area of California in general. The renaming of Crenshaw and Slauson to Nipsey Hussle Boulevard, that's a real thing. Because this guy was such an important guy. And he represents all that was good with hip hop. And that's just my take on it. I'm not going to edit this. I just want to put this up before it's not relevant anymore. But yeah, thank you, Nipsey, for everything. I appreciate you, and I thank you for everything you've done to inspire me. And that's my take on Nipsey Hussle. It doesn't matter if you like, comment, or subscribe, but I really want you to buy Nipsey Hussle music. He owns his masters. It will go to his estate. Thank you very much. And God bless.